Welcome to Sex in the News. We are the Siegel Brothers. For today's episode, we're going to bring you a couple of stories. The first one, how people's sex drives responded to the pandemic in a variety of ways. We'll then talk a bit about how sex talk can buoy the sex lives of couples with depression. And then how viewing sex as an exchange of favors in a relationship tends to backfire. So, for our first story, and this comes from the Journal of Sexual Medicine, right? Obviously, we've talked before about how sex during this pandemic, over this past year, people have reacted differently.
Sure.
Right? Again, when a lot of people go into lockdown, some people had more sex, a lot of people had less sex. So most of that was the focus for what people were looking at. And what we've been hearing consistently is that people have been having less sex, including masturbation. Right? When you look at it on a weekly basis.
You mean through the pandemic?
Through the pandemic,
right? So
yes.
there was more sex at the beginning.
Right.
And then, I think it might be like a form of what's historically been referred to as lesbian bed death. That even, other couples might experience a similar thing just from the intensity of the lockdown,
Right.
month after month after
Right.
month. We were talking last week. I can't wrap my head around this surreality that time is crawling and flying at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
there's so many ways that this has impacted people.
Indeed.
It's not surprising that a sex life would take the hit.
Right. Now, interesting that you used that as a reference point, the lesbian bed death, because one study that came out in the International Journal of Gynecology and Obstetrics found that women were actually having more sex, and they generally felt more sexual desire, at least in the early months of the pandemic.
Right.
Right? Now, while many women continue to have more sex throughout the pandemic, one thing that they did find was that the quality of their sexual interactions definitely got worse.
Yeah.
And that there was a significant deterioration in women's sexual functioning, which also included more problems with things like arousal, lubrication, and orgasmic ability.
Sure.
All right, so
I often, in the therapy room, I often encourage couples to, see this as stress reduction, as bonding, as maintaining that contentment and happiness in the house, especially with this intensity. And if there's kids around and we're working and homeschooling and ordering everything online,
Right.
it's a lot.
It is, and we know that stress has a tremendously negative impact on libido. So we're really seeing that relationship coming to bear with this pandemic. So we've also talked about this before as well. That one thing that we can expect will not happen after this pandemic is over is another baby boom.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Typically, there's always a baby boom after some extended collective, right? Like 9/11.
Yeah.
Because people find comfort and stress reduction and anxiety reduction in each other's arms.
Yeah. But unfortunately, for many people, sex becomes the major casualty of stress and feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Right? So, what's our next move here?
Another interesting study from the Archives of Sexual Behavior found that folks who view sex as an exchange of favors
What we call transactional sex.
tends to backfire. Right?
Yep.
Viewing sex as an exchange of benefits between partners may actually make sex feel less intimate and more, as you said, transactional. I've startled some folks, maybe upset, maybe even pissed off over the years by just pointing out what I think is a fairly inarguable reality, just in terms of literal definitions, that prostitution exists in marriages.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Once you get past the overt sex for money and look at things like, I'm sick of asking you to take me out dancing, so you can go sleep on the couch. What is that if not if not commodifying sex?
Well, yeah, that's exactly
Right?
what it is. Yeah.
And that's prostitution. Right?
But this is really looking more at, I think, couples that think they're being equitable. They think
Right.
they're being, that there's this give and take. And for you Gen Zers, maybe some of you millennials, I'll use the old term tit for tat. That if you give me this, I'll give you that. Now, on the surface, and I think the intention of a lot of these couples is that it's fair. And that what they're doing is
Right.
being fair. But what they don't realize is that they're setting each other up for failure and
Right.
disappointment.
Were you as surprised as I was a few weeks back when we had the brilliant Dr. Steve Snyder back on? And I forgot how it came up, but I made a reference to that often very helpful contribution from sex columnist Dan Savage, the idea of being GGG, right? Good, giving, and game. And I was surprised to hear Snyder say, "No, I don't like it."
I was a little
No.
surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, don't do things that you're not into just because you think your partner is. I have to admit, sometimes we do talk about that in sex therapy, that kind of negotiation. If somebody wants sex every day and their partner wants sex once a week, the easiest first place to start is, not to say that this is going to work, but just makes sense to start here. How about 3 times? Right? Like a negotiation. Can we meet in the middle?
Let's make a deal.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And that's really what it should be.
But, like this, it can backfire.
Right?
Right?
Right.
The study found couples who used this approach to sex tended to be less committed to each other, more negative sexual interactions, and generally seemed to have less satisfying sex
Right.
when compared to couples whose approach is more about giving pleasure just to give.
Right. So again, giving and sharing and doing for your partner is a wonderful thing, especially when you're doing it because you want to do it and you want to please your partner.
Right.
But if you're doing it to get something in return, and then this becomes this sort of pattern of transaction.
Right.
Well, now I do this for you, you do this for me. I did this for you, now you do this for me. And all of that, it basically, it ruins relationships.
I met with a couple this week where the wife was just so feeling that her husband was a selfish lover and not caring about her pleasure and her orgasm, that she decided by, as some form of ultimatum or something, that she was going to give up giving him oral sex, which was like his favorite thing. And, a couple of weeks went by, a month, and she caved because she enjoyed it. She enjoyed that was like the only connection they had. And once it got to intercourse, it was over real quick and left her feeling very unsatisfied. Right? So
nobody wins.
Yeah.
All right. So transaction is not equity.
And there's a difference between being good and game, to please your partner and be into it and have the benefit or your own arousal by seeing your partner turned on and really enjoying themselves. But in contrast, few things are less sexy than, right? Nobody should. That's not good sex, right? Nobody should feel obligated because that just leads to resentment.
It did. Disappointment and resentment.
Our last piece?
I
like the title already. I don't know how they found out about us, but apparently we're hitting big.
Well, we appear in the
Talk.
Communication Research Journal.
Sex talk can buoy the sex lives of couples with depression.
We appreciate the nod.
Are they talking about us?
Of course they are.
Yeah. This
Of
show
course.
is an
Yes.
antidepressant.
That's right. We have social value. Okay. Now again, that's one of those sort of
Interesting source, too.
dual-edged kind of swords, because on the one hand, there really isn't a better medicator for depression than sex, pleasure, orgasm. However, when somebody is depressed, the last thing they want is sex, pleasure, and orgasm.
You know, I've had a lot of conversations. I think one of the most common ones that I've seen, not so much a mood disorder like depression, but something like fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
people are in so much pain all the time, they're kind of closing in on themselves like this, and muscles can be like rock,
Yeah.
you know, and they don't even want to be touched, no less have sex. So it's a challenge, almost like a sales pitch. Say, I know you don't feel like it, I know you don't even want to be touched,
Right.
but you find a really comfortable position that doesn't require a lot of strenuous activity on your part. Just think of how much pain relief a good orgasm would provide.
Exactly.
So find that motivation, even if you're not feeling it. Same thing, we talk often about this Rosemary Basson concept of responsive horniness instead of spontaneous.
Right.
People sit around waiting. I promise, honey, as soon as I'm horny, you'll be the first to know. And weeks go by and months go by. And instead of like, how about a little arousal first?
Right.
Kissing, touching, caressing, and the desire kind of swoops in behind.
You know, and that's again one of the things I've always liked about Rosemary Basson's model is that in that typical way that we have learned, and again that Helen Singer Kaplan approach, that desire is the first stage to going into that sexual response.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be.
But no, it really doesn't, because sometimes we can bring the desire with us if we already start going down this path. Right? Again, like you said, arousal. Let's just spend time just pleasing each other, being with each other,
Right.
and that desire can come right in. But if people are waiting for that desire to come, it may not.
Yeah.
And then again, how much do people lose out on? So, again, if you're not feeling good, if you're not feeling good about yourself, if you're feeling depressed, if you have chronic pain, think of sex as a medicator. Think
And
of
even
pleasure.
according to this study, even just talking about sex has antidepressant
Absolutely.
effects.
Absolutely.
So certainly feels good for us calling our show Sex Talk.
Indeed.
Yes.
So nice to know that we can buoy the sex lives of depressed couples.
Yes.
Right? I feel a little buoy-ish. And as usual, we like to end with a piece we call Poetic Justice.
We get the opportunity to call out hypocrisy, particularly when it comes to sexuality, because there's so much of that do as I say, not as I do. And,
Indeed.
a little Freudian concept of acting in ways that are against one's values to kind of protect their ego, right?
Yeah.
So here we have a case. Unfortunately, it's become cliche, but a Dr. Dylan O'Connor, a 33-year-old pediatrician,
In Redwood City, California.
arrested for setting up a meeting with a minor for sex. Pediatrician, talk about hiding in plain sight, right?
Yep.
So there was a tip from a neighboring community, the Internet Crimes Against Children unit, which was monitoring the doctor's online activity. There was first an illegal exchange of electronic images, and then the planning to meet up.
Right. And I like the phrase sending, one of the charges was sending harmful material to a juvenile. Now, this is a pediatrician.
Yeah.
Right? Again, you want to talk about somebody who's supposed to know better. Right? But no, just like that To Catch a Predator show, he was basically setting this up, and he was going to meet this minor for sexual purposes.
Yeah. And we had a little interesting talk before we started filming with our brilliant producer about, thought crimes, like that Philip K. Dick story about the pre-crime unit and Minority Report, right?
Yep.
We're not quite there yet. We don't arrest people for having thoughts, but this is kind of a version of that. And again, like that show, I guess they're not making it anymore, right? But the To Catch a Predator, if they're monitoring online activity and seeing plans to meet up and having an undercover cop posing as a 15-year-old, inviting an adult male over who shows up at this house with cookies and condoms, only to find Chris Hansen standing in the kitchen. It's kind of hard to argue that his intent wasn't crystal clear.
Yeah, no, and I think I would definitely give into that, absolutely, because I'm also thinking that as clinicians, we do make a distinction between somebody who may just be thinking about suicide and somebody who's intending it and planning it.
Right.
That is definitely a whole different place to be.
How many of these guys, when they were busted, always, there was always the same answer. Oh, I knew that there are creeps and predators out there, so I really wanted to inform her of how dangerous.
I was just coming here.
Yeah, I was going to protect her and keep other creeps from preying on her.
Right, and he had a box of condoms and a roll of duct tape and rope in his trunk, right? Yeah, I just wanted to talk to her about the dangers.
Oh, my God.
So again, talk about in the category of one who really should know better. So for this week's Poetic Justice, Dr. Dylan O'Connor from Redwood City, California.
You get the Bronx cheer.
You. Yes.
And that'll do it for this week's Sex in the News. We'll see you next Sunday.
Indeed. Take care. Stay well.